Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well. Well, that's a greeting that's come to mean much more, hasn't it, over the past year or so? All our lives have changed in unimaginable ways, and meningitis now has really suffered. Our income fell by more than £1 million, and we had to cancel much loved events like the Five Valleys Walk and the Gloucester Cathedral Christmas concert. We had to adapt, and the Meningitis Now family pulled even closer together. We shifted many of our services online, which meant we could go on providing support. We created virtual fundraising events, and we launched the COVID-19 Young Futures Fund to ensure that young people up to the age of 25 have the resources they need to continue their education and their learning. So, having restructured, Meningitis Now is in a relatively stable financial position. Much of that is founded on the strategic plan, which was set up in the year before the pandemic. And since then, we've taken time to reassess our aims, and we believe that this plan remains right for our times. So have no doubt about it, the fight against meningitis goes on. And that fight's led by the CEO of Meningitis Now, Dr. Tom Nutt, who joins us. Tom, welcome.
Hello, Andrew.
Well, in a moment, we'll deal with questions sent in by our supporters up and down the country. But first, I mentioned the new strategy. So, Tom, tell us more about that. Why is now the right time for it?
Well, thank you, Andrew. And I think it's interesting that in your introduction, you couldn't help but mention COVID-19, because it's hard, isn't it, at the moment, not to see everything through the lens of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what I can say as Chief Executive of Meningitis Now is that even during the difficult times of the pandemic, we never lost sight of our vision as a charity of a future where no one loses their life to meningitis and where all those people affected get the support they need to rebuild their lives. So even though the pandemic was a terrible disruption for us, as it was for many other people, and although it did force us to restructure following that loss of more than £1 million last year, we think it's absolutely the right time to launch a new strategic plan, because we need to set out how we're going to achieve that vision that I've just mentioned. I suppose I'd also mention that, of course, this is a strategy that really is born out of an assessment of Meningitis Now's past, present, and future. For 35 years, Andrew, and this predates my time, but we've achieved so much as a charity. We've contributed to the development and the introduction of 5 life-saving vaccines onto the NHS immunisation schedule. We've helped thousands and thousands of families through bereavement support, through financial support, with all sorts of emotional and practical support. And of course, during this time, we've also shared life-saving information and awareness. And in doing this, what we've done is we've created a community called the Meningitis Now family. And that's a community that is absolutely committed to saving lives and rebuilding futures. So my hope is that by launching the strategy now, what we can do is build on this impactful, this really powerful history, but set ourselves a future pathway that we can follow over the next 5 years.
Now, you've set on 3 new priorities. Would you just outline those for us, would you?
So our first priority is to fight to defeat meningitis in the UK within a generation. And this is an exciting one, really, because it reflects the fact that for the first time ever, we have a generation of youngsters who will be growing up with the protection of vaccines against all the main causes of bacterial meningitis. And this is great news and a cause for celebration. But of course, our work is really far from done. And there is still a need for ongoing scientific and medical research to improve that prevention and also to improve the diagnosis and treatment of meningitis. And so this priority is about allowing us to continue to fund and promote this. But of course, vaccines only work when people know about them. And as many people watching this tonight will know, as Jonathan Van Tam, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, said, vaccines only work when they're in people's arms. So it's really important that we as a charity continue to raise awareness of vaccines and fight for people's equitable access to those vaccines, which means we'll also be continuing to work constructively, I hope, but also forcefully when necessary with politicians, with policymakers, with the NHS, public health authorities, because these are all the people that we need to join us in our fight to defeat meningitis within a generation in the UK. Second priority is to reach out to people who need our help, support and information. And we feel this very strongly because as long as there is meningitis in the UK, we need to continue to raise awareness of the risks and the signs and symptoms of the disease in order to save lives. And so we'll be continuing our effective campaigns, particularly targeting those people at risk. So, for example, infants and adolescents, students and the over 65s. But of course, like we've done in the past couple of years, we'll be continuing to stress that, in fact, meningitis can affect anyone at any age. But equally, Andrew, we also have to make sure that people can access the support we offer as they navigate their life after meningitis, this terrible disease. I've already mentioned how this charity Meningitis Now offers invaluable emotional, practical and financial support to people across the UK. But all too often people come to us saying, oh, if only we'd known about you before, which is a tragedy, really. And so what we want to do by prioritising reaching out is to make sure that all the people who need to know about our services know about them and how to access them as easily as possible. And the same applies to our information. We have a long track record of supplying information to people, such as through our helpline, through fact sheets, signs and symptoms cards, and through dedicated programs that support organisations like universities or childcare providers. We are in many ways an authority on meningitis information, and we perceive a priority to continue to hold that position, but to reach out to all the people who really would benefit from that information and that help and support. Our third priority is to be recognised as a centre of expertise for aftercare and support. And this is because we as a charity really know how tough life can be after meningitis, and especially how it can leave people feeling sometimes isolated and alone after experiencing such a terrible but relatively rare disease. We do already, I hope you'll agree, we do already offer outstanding support for people across the UK, whether that's the bereavement support we offer, the financial support we offer, such as through the Rebuilding Futures Fund, the peer support that we help to provide, as well as dedicated programs for youngsters, such as the Believe and Achieve program. So by being recognised as a centre of expertise, we're determined to build on this great work by doing three things. So firstly, we want to expand our research programme so that we can better understand the needs of people who are living their lives after meningitis. So after effects in adults, for example. And this in turn can help us to enhance and improve the support and the services we offer, and so improve, hopefully, the lives and the outcomes for those people. We'll also continue, as we've done over the past several years, to focus on evidencing the difference that we can make, capturing that difference through evaluation and feeding it into improvement. I think that's really important. But then thirdly, in becoming a centre of expertise, we also want to be able to make sure that we share what it is we've learned about making a difference. And we'll share that with other professionals, such as health and care professionals, other charities as well, in the UK, but also beyond, wherever essentially we can continue to make a difference.
Good. Well, let's hear now from some of our supporters. Let's start with Leslie from Yorkshire, who says the COVID-19 pandemic has sadly left Meningitis Now a smaller charity than it was a year ago, but the strategy is national in its scale. So what Les is asking is the charity being realistic in its ambition to be a national charity? And quite basically, can this be achieved?
Well, Leslie's absolutely right. And thank you, Leslie. She's absolutely right to recognise that the COVID-19 pandemic has left us as a smaller charity. But we are smaller, but we're still mighty. We are a national charity and we will continue to be so. So we still have teams that are active across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. But, we are smaller, but we're still mighty. We still have teams that are active across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And, we still have teams that are active across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And, we still have teams that are active across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. I suppose there is a context to this as well. Meningitis cases have been falling, as many people watching this will know, since the 1990s. And of course, as there are fewer cases, it does become harder to reach out across the nations of the UK and to all people. So I think we do need to work harder and smarter. And what I envisage is doing more of what we've done in recent years, really, Andrew. So whether that's work that's been hastened through the pandemic, such as our work on digital platforms, so reaching out to people through the internet and social media and so on. But we can also expand our reach by working in partnerships with other organisations that share our vision and purpose, I suppose. So that could be other charities, such as the Believe and Achieve Trust in Manchester, Greater Manchester, for example, but also doing what we've always done, which is to work very closely with public health authorities, who will often be the first point of contact, or one of the first points of contacts for people who've experienced meningitis.
Okay, Anne in Scotland says, the strategy talks about reaching out to at-risk groups. And can you say a little more about the charity's plans to reach students who, all being well, will be returning to university this autumn?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Anne. And this is absolutely part of our reaching out strategy, and so it remains central to the work of meningitis now. So contemporary students will be at risk of meningitis. They are a cohort of youngsters who have had the MenACWY vaccination, for example, but they won't have had the MenB vaccination. And so as long as these young adults are clustering together as they do on campuses, then they remain at risk. So absolutely, our campaigns to raise awareness amongst students will absolutely continue, whether that's through our campaigns, that target students themselves and their parents with information about the risk of meningitis, the signs and symptoms, the importance of acting with urgency. But we'll also support students through our programs such as the Meningitis Aware Recognition Mark, which also helps to equip universities themselves to support their students to prevent the disease and how to respond should a case happen on campus. So we'll absolutely continue with that focus.
Ian from Yorkshire picks up on that theme and says, can you say more about MenACWY vaccine take-up and more generally over the last year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, again, another good question from Ian, who I think is probably alluding to the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the schools program, which is where teenagers will be receiving their MenACWY vaccination. And of course, that's been disruptive with all the schools closures. So this is an example of where we work closely with public health and the NHS bodies who are responsible for this program, and we maintain a vigilance. And what they tell us is that yes, there has been disruption. Vaccine take-up rates in this age group have fallen inevitably, but we've also received reassurances from Public Health England, for example, that the providers who are responsible for those programs are on the case. They've been asked to ensure that there will be catch-up later on this year, and they're doing so using innovative methods in some cases, or by, for example, doubling up when the opportunity comes round again. So we will remain vigilant, but I hope we can also be assured that the MenACWY program, although disrupted, will get back on track.
Good. A question from Angela in Warwickshire. Even if the NHS put in place catch-up vaccine programs to vaccinate young people with MenACWY, they're still vulnerable to MenB. You haven't said anything, she says, about anything specific about encouraging people to get this paid-for vaccination. So what's the view on that?
Yeah. Well, that's right, Andrew. And I mean, our charity's position on this has been consistent. We believe that all people in those at-risk groups should have equitable access to life-saving vaccines, and that includes that MenB vaccination. And so whilst it's great that we have a generation of youngsters, all under 5 and under, who are growing up hopefully protected against MenB, it remains a huge disappointment to this charity, and I'm sure to Angela, that older generations have not got access to that vaccine on the NHS. So we'll be continuing to work towards that goal. What we can do is make sure that people have got the information available to them that can help them to make an informed choice about how they might go about accessing that vaccine, because it's not a cheap vaccine to secure privately, but it is available on the high street through community pharmacists such as Boots and others. So what we do, and I think we'll continue to do this, is to provide information to those people to be able to make an informed choice as to whether getting that MenB vaccination is right for them. But we'll continue to fight for the wider rollout as well.
Okay, you talked, Tom, about how the strategy seeks to be recognised as a centre of expertise for aftercare and support. Margaret from Scotland wants to know, do you see working with GP surgeries to raise awareness of Meningitis Now's wide range of support as important? And if so, what plans do you have about that?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And this is an example of where priorities 2 and 3 absolutely overlap. It's critically important as we work to develop our expertise in aftercare and support that as many people as possible can access that help and support. And I'm very pragmatic about this. We need to make sure that people can access our support through being made aware of it through whatever route works. We already work very closely with the public health authorities to ensure that people are signposted towards us if they need help and support. And I'm sure there is more that can be done where possible to work with primary care, so in other words, GP practices, also to make that support offer, if you like, more accessible. I absolutely agree with Margaret. We'll do as much as we can, but of course, GP practices are busy places at the moment and not easy to get to for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Finally, one last but important question from Bob in Essex. Is the strategy too ambitious? Is it realistic to eliminate meningitis? And what does defeating meningitis actually mean?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, if you could extract the DNA of meningitis now, what you would find threading through it is a fight to defeat meningitis. And whilst it's great that numbers, as I've already mentioned, case numbers are falling and have been falling for a number of years, the last thing we need to do is to become complacent that it's job done. So the fight has to continue, Andrew. We have to be here for the people who need us now, for the people who will need us tomorrow, and we'll continue that fight for as long as it takes.
Well, finally, Tom, thanks for tackling all those questions. I wonder if you've got a final message or thought you'd like to leave us with.
Mm-hmm. Well, only to say thanks to you, Andrew, really, for hosting this evening, and also to all those supporters who sent questions in. And I'm sorry if anyone hasn't had their question answered. What I would say is that this charity, Meningitis Now, has a clear vision and purpose, and we've now got a clear 5-year strategy. But the charity is nothing if not its people, which is why it's so important just to reiterate that thanks to you, thanks to all the Meningitis Now family, and to say that the fight against meningitis goes on.
Well, thanks, Tom. And finally, let's meet some of the people behind Meningitis Now, people for whom this organisation means a great deal.
We are the meningitis movement.
We are survivors.
We are the ones we have lost.
We are a future where nobody in the UK dies from meningitis.
We are support for as long as it's needed.
We are listening.
We are lifesavers and life changers.
We are a force to be reckoned with.
We are family.
We are hope. We are here.
And across the UK,
we are Meningitis Now.
Saving lives and rebuilding futures.
Making a difference now.